In Manitoba right now, there are more than 11,000 children in the welfare system. More than 9,000 of those children are First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. For years now, there have been calls to overhaul the child welfare system in the province. For our coverage of Canada 150 and the stories that make up our country, we went to Manitoba to speak with one woman who is working to help bring families back together. Meet Cora Morgan.
Our office has been open now for 2 years, providing the advocacy support. We're called Abanujiak Begawiak, meaning our children are coming home. And that doesn't mean that they're just physically coming home, but when our people go back to our traditional ways and our understandings, our teachings, and, we're going to come home. Our children are going to be healthy, our families are going to be healthy, and we're not going to need this child welfare system. So on average, our office, and there's 2 staff, myself and an assistant advocate, and on average we get around 1,200 calls a month of people that are looking for help. And so that ranges from grandparents that are trying to get their grandchildren out of the CFS system, out of foster homes, group homes, shelter environments, mothers, fathers, and that are just looking for support and assistance and advocacy. Manitoba has the highest apprehension rates in the Western world, just our province alone. So we have over 11,000 children in the child welfare system here in Manitoba. So there's a high need for support. We have some agencies that, work really hard and try to help families in different ways. And then we have agencies that are really terrible. And some of those really terrible agencies won't even let our office through the doors to help support our families in meetings. We have a really huge crisis here in Manitoba of newborn apprehensions, where we get close to 400 newborns apprehended each year. And so what happens is typically if a mother aged out of the child welfare system, sometimes they're flagged and birth alerts are issued on their children or their babies. So they could show up to the hospital, give birth to their baby, and then they'll get a letter dropped off at the hospital saying that, their baby's going to be apprehended at discharge. For a mother, it's, a seriously emotional time, and there's all kinds of anticipation and excitement. But, for a lot of our First Nations mothers, it's, their worst nightmare. For these last 150 years, our children have been taken, and they've been put into systems and institutions, and, that precipitates every social issue that we have today. And so, we went from the historical residential school system that spanned, 160 years. That transformed. We had a period where we had sanatoriums that, also kept our families apart. And then we had the Children's Aid Society in the 60s scoop, during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now this is just this, current form. And for the most part, majority of parents don't even know where their children are. Like, the agencies do not let the mom and dad know, oh, your child is with this family, or your child is in this shelter. I just had a mom who contacted me on the weekend, and she had just got to see her children for the first time in 7 years. And she sent me a picture of this home that her children were placed in, and they would be locked up at night. You could hopefully believe that, all these children are in these wonderful, loving foster homes, that people are doing it because they love children. There are people that love children, and they do it for the absolute right reasons. But there's also a lot of people that do it because it's an added income. It is daunting, and there's been a lot of really hopeless moments. But, when you are able to respond to a newborn baby and know that baby gets to go home, those things make things worthwhile. In September 2015, we were asked by the Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Derek Nepenak, to attend a ceremony in Serpent River in Ontario. And so we went to that ceremony, and we met people for the very first time. And we heard this prophecy about these petroglyphs in Serpent River, where you have a man with serpent arms who steals children. And later on in the story, there's a baby with feathers in their hair. And they said that as long as our babies have feathers in their hair, they'll always return home. And I equated that with, when our children are grounded in their identity, that they'll always come home. And so this woman I had just met that day, I just flippantly said, if at minimum all our office could do was offer children feathers for their hair, then that's what we'll do. Because that was earlier on in the job, and it was really, really tough back then. And so that woman, 4 days later, she drove 22 hours to bring us eagle feathers for babies. So those things, there's something, and I'm trying to be super optimistic and excited that there's going to be change. But in the meantime, there's an enormous amount of suffering that's happening. And you think about these children, and we don't have access to them. We don't know what's happening to them, but we know it's not good.
And we sincerely want to thank Cora Morgan for taking time out of her busy schedule to speak with us.